The Fresh Toones Music Show is underwritten by the Animation Workshop at Animated Studio, providing animation instruction since 1993. Please visit their website at animatedstudio.com. 1984, 2024, we've been there before. I thought we'd close that door, but George Orwell said it well. Without love, we'll live in our own hell. In our own hell. Welcome to the Fresh Toones Show. My name is Dave Paltz, and once again I have kind of a unique show for you. I figured with so much history happening around us, and maybe some of our worst history is happening right before our eyes, I figured maybe I'd just mix in some history lessons with some songs today. Often when I start my day and I'm doing my exercises, I'll watch a great courses lecture, and been doing that for years, and I've seen some really good history lectures. So I thought I'd share some of them, edited down to just 2 or 3 minute segments, and then maybe I'd throw in a song or two that was connected to what the lecture was about. All the ones that you'll hear on the show today were kind of more politically connected, and I thought, well, this would be a good time to maybe share some of them and share some of my fresh tunes that are related to the lectures that I'll be sharing today. I have a recent song that would kind of lead into today's themes of lessons in history, and it's called That's Just the Way, and it's about how often you'll hear people say, that's just the way it is. What else can you do about it? So I wrote this song. That's just the way. That's just the way we are. Nothing wrong in how it's done. It's been that way so long, burned in our brain, carved in our scars. That's just the way. That's just the way. Halfway worn for us to trek, an easy trail that we might regret. Decisions may demand we hide, be poker-faced and stay in line. That's just the way. That's just the way. It's worked before, so why not now? No better way is to be found. There are things that have improved, there may be more, it's up to you. That's just the way. That's just the way. It's up to us to find a way to make things better and not just say, nothing here can never change. Let's flip the switch and take a stand. Let's change the way. Let's change the way. Let's change the way. Let's change the way. Well, that first song should get us ready to jump right into the first lecture here. The first lecture is called John Locke and Government by the People.
And in his 2 treatises on government, Locke went as thoroughly to the bedrock of politics as he had in the essay concerning human understanding. Government is, therefore, an invention of the people. It's not handed down from heaven on a silver platter. Kings are not born, booted and spurred by God and ready to ride all the rest of us. Nor is anybody born with an inherent status like duke or earl or nobility in the state of nature. In the state of nature, everyone is born equally poor and equally empty-handed. And we invent kings, we invent dukes, we invent earls and whatnot to serve as protectors of people's property. Third, if a government, or a king, or a duke, or an earl, are not doing the job they were invented to perform, the people who made them, precisely because they made them, have the authority to toss the scoundrels aside and find some other useful way of protecting their property. For instance, said Locke, the moment you catch them governing without settled standing laws, that's a sure sign a change is needed. Because no matter how much they may rage and plead some form of divine right for what they do, no one would ever have left the state of nature and put themselves under their rule were it not, said Locke, to preserve their lives, liberties, and fortunes, and by stated rules of right and property to secure their peace and quiet. Or, said Locke, when you see the supreme executor of the government going about to set up his own arbitrary will in the place of law, or when that executor employs the force, treasure, and offices of the society to corrupt the rest of the government by solicitations, threats, promises. At that moment, said Locke, such an executor cannot any longer be trusted.
Well, John Locke certainly had a lot to share with us to try to be attentive to a government for the people. The next lecture is about Hitler's Germany. The speaker emphasizes that only a third of the German people voted for Hitler, but because of the way the government was set up, the votes of that 1/3 of the population gave Hitler just the power he needed to run with it, and we saw the results of that. Recently, I wrote this poem called 90 Million, and it's about the 1/3 of the citizens in the United States that couldn't find a way to make a decision in the election of 2024, and now we're paying for it. 90 million. 90 million couldn't take the time. 90 million couldn't make up their minds. 90 million could see no difference. 90 million wish they had listened. 90 million say, don't blame me. 90 million still can't see. 90 million say, I'm just one. 90 million quib, what's done is done. 90 plus regret what's now seen. 90 plus cry out, someone fix it please. 90 plus, best look no nearer. 90 plus, should check the mirror. And now here's the edited down Great Courses lecture called Hitler's Germany.
How did the Nazis subvert the German government and break political opposition? When the Nazis came into power, they had about 1/3 of the German vote. When Hitler was appointed chancellor on January 30th, 1933, 1/3 of the population, roughly, was in support, had voted for the Nazis. In the last free elections in Germany, before Hitler's appointment, the Nazis had gotten about 33% of the vote. Another way to put that is 2/3 of the German population might not have been opposed to all the things the Nazis stood for, but given a choice, they chose another political party. So how did a party that really had about 1/3 of the population behind it manage within 6 months of 1933 to transform a democratic government into a would-be totalitarian state? It was a regime driven by an ideology that believed that it had discovered the key to all human history, and that the movement, the National Socialist movement, found itself at the turning point of all human history. It had to act, or humankind would go in the wrong direction. That meant that whatever was necessary to be done to save humanity from taking the wrong path was justified. And if that trampled on traditional morality, too bad. Why was there so little opposition of Nazi racial policy that would lead from the economic boycotts of Jewish businesses in 1933 to the grisly horrors of Auschwitz? How did that happen? How did so-called Aryan Germans react to the regime's measures, the step-by-step exclusion of Jews from German society, and then ultimately their transport and extermination. What would you have done? How would you have reacted? Would you have been among those who actually recognized the evil of this movement at a time when it was still possible to do something about it? We all like to think we would. Would we? Would we be among those courageous few who were actually able to take steps of resistance against the regime? Would you have had the courage to act?
Well, to lead us right into the next lecture called The Divine Rights of Kings, I'm going to share this little poem that I wrote called Invidious Covidius, and then go right into the lecture. Invidious Covidius. Covidius, to feed his hunger, scrounged in search of tasty souls. He used his mighty nostrils to sniff out the scared and old. He stalked to find the feeble, heard commotion from not far. A darkened cave invited, come pray and feast and chow. He marched into the dimness, licked his chops for what he saw. A throng on knees while calloused, clutched his robe and wouldn't let go. Ready for their sacrifice, they begged and offered up. Please give us all the answers, we'll gladly serve your lust. Their hallowed wolf obliged them, and devoured what was left of a brain that had forgotten, that once had thoughts of love.
First of all, how do you define absolutism? And the easiest way to define it is just to say it's a system in which all sovereignty resides in the king. The king does not share power and has no real partners in rule.
I am the chosen one.
In absolutism, king's power is virtually unrestrained. It's unrestrained by laws. The king is considered to be above the law. And it's unrestrained by parliaments or national assemblies.
Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, but I don't even talk about that.
The king rules by divine right, which of course is itself nothing new. Even medieval kings claimed divine right. But now the king claims to embody the state. Louis XIV's famous saying, "I am the state." And there's an idea that the king himself is all the authority in the state.
More importantly, Article 2 allows me to do whatever I want.
This growth in power, and especially the growth in the power and size of the state, causes a lot of people to become alienated and does actually cause quite a lot of opposition. So it's not an easy road to get to absolutism, but we do see it succeed in a number of countries.
It's a thing called Article 2. Nobody ever mentions Article 2. It gives me all of these rights at a level that nobody has ever seen before. We don't even talk about Article 2.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
You're listening to the Fresh Toones Show, and the theme of today's show is called Lessons in History. I thought, well, with so much going on in the world and so much history being made, maybe it wouldn't hurt to look back on a little history and do a little review with some great courses, lectures about the subject. I'm going to jump much further back in history than the previous lectures, and this one's called Plato's Allegory of the Cave.
The parable of the cave, or usually referred to as the allegory of the cave. And Plato now asks us, with this extraordinarily vivid imagination that he has, to imagine entering an underground cavern in which we find darkness and illusion, because it is so much without light or enlightenment. And the people in this underground cavern as they look around, can see only illusion and not reality. They have hardly any sense of what they're looking at. They look at the walls of the cave and they see the shadows on the walls of the cave and they imagine that that's reality. As Plato points out, this is ignorance, profound ignorance, and yet these people that inhabit the cave are unaware of it. Now he says further, what would happen if a person were able to turn around and look towards the entrance of the cave, see light down that long tunnel, follow the tunnel out into the open, understand for the first time through the sunlight, through the light out there, that the reality that is outside the cave is true reality. What was mistaken as reality inside the cave is only illusion. What if that person who got out came back and told these people, look, you've been looking only at the shadows and the walls of the cave and not reality? Well, Plato says that the sort of state that we must have would have to educate the population in a way that when that person came back, having been out of the cave, he or she would be welcomed as a ruler and not as a wild-eyed lunatic. People must be educated then, not that they, the whole majority, can get out of the cave, but at least to receive that person when that person comes back with an understanding that that person has been truly enlightened. We want those individuals to rule. And at the very end of the allegory, Plato says in his Republic, we don't want, he says, an unjust polity any longer, in which men live fighting one another about shadows and quarreling for power as if that were some great prize. The kind of just polis that we need will have rulers unlike any ruler of the present day, because our rulers will think of holding power only as an unavoidable necessity and have no lust for it. For the truth is that you can have a well-governed society only if you can discover for your future rulers a better way of life than being in office. Then only will power be in the hands of men who are rich, not in gold, but in the wealth that brings happiness, a good and wise life. All goes wrong when starved for lack of anything good in their own lives. Men turn to public affairs, hoping to snatch from thence the happiness they hunger for. They set about fighting for power, and this internecine conflict ruins them and their country. The life of true philosophy is the only one that looks down upon offices of state, and access to power must be confined to men who are not in love with it. So whom else can you compel to undertake the guardianship of the Commonwealth, if not those who, besides understanding best the principles of government, enjoy a nobler life than the politicians today and look for rewards of a different kind? One must not lust for power. One must receive power as an obligation, as a responsibility to the whole state, to use it because there is a common interest and not a selfish interest involved. They'll see power as a responsibility and not as an object to be acquired. When Plato says that the problem today is that people are starved for lack of anything good in their own lives, and then they go into politics, he's making a critical point, and that is the political leaders that we want must be individuals who have integrity and character, who have discovered their arete as being that of political leadership, and enter politics precisely because they understand that this is a noble profession.
This lecture about Plato's allegory of the cave inspired this song of mine called Dancing Shadows. The shadows dancing on the wall, enchant, distract, confuse us all. To turn around, the chains prevent. Our heads seem locked, feet fixed in their cement. Dancing shadows are not what exist. Shades of gray but don't really live. Melt the chains and step out in love. Be the one you want to become. To free the shackles, to find the source. Detect the light that offers us warmth. Behold what radiates on each new day from the entrance that seems so far, far away. Dancing shadows are not what exist. Shades of gray but don't really live. Melt the chains and step out in love. Be the one you want to become. To step outside into the light. To shade our eyes and open them wide. To finally dig free from our fears. The shadow's gone now, our sight is now clear. The dancing shadows are not what exist. Shades of gray but don't really live. Melt the chains and step out in love. And be the one you want to become. Well, time is running short here in the Fresh Toones Show today, but I certainly want to get this last lecture in. It's called Presidents and the Rule of Law.
In August 1974, an investigation that transfixed the American public and tested the strength of our political system came to a head. A seemingly inconsequential burglary of a Democratic Party office at the Watergate building complex in Washington, D.C. 2 years earlier had metastasized into a full-blown scandal in the presidency of Richard Nixon, including cover-ups, hush money payments, and an informant named Deep Throat. As the crisis grew, Congress opened an investigation and demanded answers. And although the president claimed that the law didn't apply to him, impeachment loomed.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
On August 8th, President Nixon took to the airwaves to address the nation and announced that he decided to resign. Not, mind you, because he had done anything wrong, but because he no longer had, quote, a strong enough political base in Congress. In spite of his denials, it was clear that America's system for keeping presidential power in check had worked. Nixon's resignation was unprecedented. The first time that an American president had not served out his full term of office for any reason other than death. The power to investigate a sitting president is the power to limit his or her authority and thereby rein in the potential for abuse. It's also, not coincidentally, the power to restrict the president's legitimate exercise of authority for illegitimate reasons. Something of a similar dynamic has been deployed by President Trump in his responses to various findings that the investigation of his presidential campaign have brought to light, which he has repeatedly dubbed #fake news. This sort of megaphone to control the debate is a power unequaled in any other context by any other criminal subject. The president also has certain formal powers that are not available to the criminal defendant typically. To cite the most obvious example, under the current structure of the executive branch, the special counsel who is designated to investigate a president works for the Department of Justice and is, in the end, responsible to and under the authority of that very same president. It's a unique circumstance where the subject of an investigation is also the boss of the person or group charged with conducting the investigation. Exercising such control may not work out well for the president politically. We'll look at what happened to President Nixon after the events famously known as the Saturday Night Massacre, when he ordered the firing of Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. But as a matter of law, this is a significant authority. Likewise, the president has a nearly unrestricted power to issue a pardon for any federal crimes. While the pardon power is not absolute, it doesn't cover state crimes, for example, it is a tool that a president can use to protect his friends and allies. Again, using the tool will probably come at a significant political cost, but if that is a cost the president is willing to bear, he can, in effect, frustrate a criminal investigation by pardoning all of his alleged co-conspirators. Some even argue that the president can pardon himself. And then, too, the president has some unique privileges that only he can wield. For example, testimonial privileges that allow the president to limit the testimony of executive officials. Grounded in the need for candid presidential advice, the executive privilege allows the government to refuse to turn over information about internal conversations. Typically employed to oppose a congressional investigation, the privilege has also been used to delay and short-circuit criminal investigations, with mixed success. The argument has also been made that the president is simply unindictable while in office, and therefore immune from criminal prosecution. Although, as we will see, that issue too remains undecided.
It's a thing called Article 2. Nobody ever mentions Article 2. It gives me all of these rights at a level that nobody has ever seen before. We don't even talk about Article 2.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
Well, that's going to wrap up today's Fresh Toones Show. Didn't have a lot of music going on today, but I had a lot of lessons for us to learn from. I hope everybody has a good week. Speak up, be creative, have fun. So long now. Bye. 1984, 2024. We've been there before. I thought we'd close that door, but George Orwell said it well. Without love, we'll live in our own hell. In our own